Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's long-range technical forecast video brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. This analysis is being provided for perspective only, and any decision made based upon this presentation is the sole responsibility of the person making the decision. Finally, please remember that all long-range weather forecasting is speculative by nature. Well, I was getting made fun of last night in a meeting, and I was getting made fun of because of this map. A couple of my friends, we were talking about how humid it was yesterday in parts of Illinois, and I said, well, the air mass that you're dealing with came from the Yucatan. And so for the next couple of hours, I kept hearing references to Yucatan air mass. But it did. Look at this. This is where the tropical moisture began that pulled all the way into this section of Illinois, Iowa, Missouri, Wisconsin, midday yesterday. It was some of the highest precipitable water amounts that I've actually seen, getting into parts of Illinois where we were measuring numbers that were in the total column approaching 3 inches. Well, of course, much drier air has come in, and this is how things are going to look by tomorrow morning on Thursday. And you can just see kind of this northwest infusion of much drier air as what was left of Cristobal finally moves on off to the north and eastern part of North America here. Now, as it went through, look at the maximum hourly averaged wind speed. So this does not include gusts, but this was yesterday on June 9th, what we were looking at in terms of wind speeds. And there were a pocket like right in through this area here where we were seeing 40 to 50 mile an hour winds just sustained. Some of the gusts were getting to be several miles an hour faster than that. Don't forget, inside of the deeper trough that was on the back side of this, we had snow in parts of Montana, in the interior parts of Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, and on the back side of this, some ferociously strong northerly winds and some much cooler temperatures. Now, to the south of it, I want you to watch this animation. As I play it forward, this is just middle of the day yesterday until the evening. And I'm going to pause it right here because I want you to see all of this that you see down here. This is all dust getting blown around out of the southwest and southern plains, and this is a fire. So if you watch this again, you can really see the smoke from the fire and the dust being blown around. And I saw some pictures yesterday from some cities down here in the south central United States, and I just couldn't believe how bad the air quality was due to the dust being blown around on the backside of this system. Now today, our main severe weather threat, and by the way, the Storm Prediction Center has issued a moderate risk for severe storms in this part of Michigan. But as this system wraps itself out up to the northeast, it is going to be capable of producing a lot of severe weather over parts of India and Ohio, Michigan, and then the surrounding states. So as we're going to watch this system push on off to the east and really calm things down after that, it's going to kick and scream on its way out, as you can see here. Now, total accumulated precipitation, a very narrow corridor in through the midsection of the country where we did see between 1 and 3 inches of rainfall with some locally heavier amounts in parts of Iowa, southeastern Minnesota, and Wisconsin. And the models did an excellent job kind of picking up on this corridor as possibly being a lot more hit or miss. Some folks in there did not get any precipitation out of this. What you see back here in parts of Nebraska, getting up into South Dakota, was kind of the tail end 3 days ago of the severe weather. And some of those storms that came in on June the 8th into this part of Nebraska produced some massive hail. I saw 4.5-inch hail out of that. Further to the south, flooding along the Gulf Coast, flooding in Mississippi, flooding in Louisiana, and flooding in southern Alabama as this particularly powerful system in terms of rainfall pulled through. But we're going to talk about what's going on here because it has not only been dry recently, it's been dry for a while before this, and that's something that I think we need to be discussing because this is the calculated soil moisture anomalies that we've got right now through June 8th. So this does not include the precipitation from June 9th, which again is going to really bring up the values right into this corridor. But I was concerned about a couple of things. First is this. See, a year ago right now, this is how things looked. So again, I can go back and forth here. Take a look. That's now. This is 1 year ago right now. So this is incredibly important to see the major differences in moisture content, especially in the south central plains of the United States right now. Okay. Now, as we go into this forecast, what we're going to see is a pretty highly amplified flow. So here's our Aleutian Island low. Look at the wavelength right now setting up a trough along the west coast. Now, if anything changes in the wavelength of these two features, it's going to upset the whole pattern across North America. And I'm going to watch for that in a few moments. But we do notice that by the weekend, as that trough sweeps through, making unsettled weather in the northwestern United States and along the west coast, cooling things down, there's a large ridge moving into the center part of the country. Now that ridge, and of course on the backside of this trough, things are going to get dry. They're going to be cool initially here in the east, but in the south central plains, getting into the high plains, the heat is going to come back on. It's going to be windy, and we're going to be dealing here with some pretty high evaporation rates. Because as we look out over the next week, you notice where we're not getting the precipitation. Just remember, what you see here, this is all coming today. So that'll be out of there after today, and it's going to be a relatively dry center section of the United States for quite some time. And only action is really going to be here in the Pacific Northwest and in the Mid-Atlantic. We're going to keep a very close eye on quite a bit of precipitation for parts of the Carolinas getting into Virginia. Now, if I compare it all to normal, this is what things look like for week 1. So do notice how much drier things are getting as this whole pattern shifts. It features that big ridge that's doing something like this right up the midsection of the country as we work our way into the next 5 to 7 days. Now, this does not include yesterday's rainfall, but this is what I was talking about. The last 14 days of precipitation expresses a % of normal. So we're going to be seeing, of course, changes in areas up here. But what I want you to notice is this quadrant in through here has been very, very dry as of late, and that's going to be critical to understanding what the next few weeks may shape up to be like. It has been very sunny in there as well. In fact, if you just kind of look at this, we can see a corridor in through here where we've had above average sunshine, and then it's been much more cloudy in through this area and down in the southeast as well as we look back over the last 20 days or so. Also, the Canadian prairies have been quite cloudy too. So let's just keep this all in mind, because remember, we presented how cloudy of a May we did have in certain sections of the country. But if I just take those drawings off there and you look again, in addition to that dry weather, the sun has been able to beat down on the ground and really evaporate a lot of the moisture out of the soil. So that's why from our satellite-based observations here from GRACE, we can see that this section of the United States root zone soil moisture content is very low right now. So it's a way to kind of measure drought. Now, the big questions come into, is this going to expand? Is it going to move east? And what does that mean for our summer pattern? Because we've already started to see our longer range models responding to this. So over the next week, we are expecting, due to windy conditions and the rebuilding of heat into this area, higher evapotranspiration rates. So as we crank up that evaporation, some of the issues you saw at the beginning of this video with the dust, nothing in the models right now is going to remedy that. So we're going to continue to see problems with really taking a lot of the moisture out of the topsoil here. Good news is, at least in the beginning, temperatures are cool. So today you can already see the cool air behind that deep front that extends all the way down here to the Gulf of Mexico. Warm out ahead of it. This is where the destabilized atmosphere is. But watch these temperatures change over the next couple of days. Thursday's high temperatures, colors are departure from normal. Here's how things shape up on Friday. Look, the heat's already building back into the central plains, the high plains, and the northern plains here. See that? And then as I go into the day on Saturday, remember, this is where the jet stream was doing this. And under that ridge, look at all the heat that is building back in here. That heat coming in with no additional precipitation overall is going to just give us, well, there might be a few pop-up storms. That's normal, right? We normally get that. But outside of that, if you don't get it, it's going to be very dry. Into Sunday, much of the same, almost triple-digit heat here in the south central plains, and that continues into Monday and Tuesday as well, as I kind of skirt through that pretty quickly. After Tuesday, we're going to start to see some of this warmth move its way back east a little bit, but with this drier weather that's coming in this part of the country, there isn't at least much heat stress in the near term as well. It's all back here in the south central plains of the United States. The West Coast, you just continue on your pretty wild ride of temperature swings, where the Central Valley of California, for example, gets up into the triple digits and then has a few days where the highs barely get out of the upper 70s. That flow in the North Pacific is really making sure that that happens. Now, as I look longer term, and I come back to this idea on the South Central Plains, I took you out to Wednesday the 17th. We're looking at the mean wind flow in the middle of the day. And what we just notice here is just look at the wind direction. Some of it's coming out of New Mexico and Arizona, and some of it's coming out of South Central Texas. It's not coming out of the Gulf of Mexico. So what this tells me is this is a pretty dry air mass moving across this section of the country, which is what's really limiting our next really 7 to 10 plus days of total accumulated precipitation. But I really want to ask myself, is anything blocking up this pattern such that I should be worried about this, more worried about it than I am, I guess I should say, in the longer term? And as I go out here to day 10, I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 separate waves across the northern hemisphere. And in general, this is just a general way of thinking about it. The more waves we have, the shorter the wavelength pattern. The shorter the wavelength pattern, the more it tends to move. The long waves, if there are fewer of them, they tend to retrograde and get stuck. So at this point, I don't see any Rex blocks. I don't see any high over lows. I don't see no omega blocks. I don't see anything that says, look out, we're in trouble. But I'm gonna add a caveat to that in just a few seconds. Does the GFS agree? Well, look, here's the European, here's the GFS. While the models have subtle differences, overall, that's pretty darn good agreement, okay? So what do we get into week 2? Well, this is going to be precipitation anomalies the 17th through the 24th. Now, interestingly enough, when you compare the two models, both of them are trying to keep this section of the country and even parts of the Pacific Northwest active at times over the next couple of weeks. But look at the GFS also keeping parts of the western and northern Corn Belt and the Great Lakes states on the wetter side of things. It really favors drier conditions as you get down toward the coast here. The European doesn't see that, and the reason why is really quite subtle. And I think part of the reason why might be the fact that the European ensemble's 50 members, and it might be just washing out a signal that the GFS, having only 20 members in its ensemble, is picking up on. I'm just going to go ahead and say this. This is the area right in through here that I think we have the least confidence about. The Mid-Atlantic is showing up wet, and it does appear that with the trough that's coming in there, plus some possible almost tropical-like low pressure, not hurricanes, but tropical-like low pressure development is something I'm going to keep an eye on there. But that's how things are shaping up in week 2. So let's just fast forward, go straight into the last few days of June and the beginning of July. So this is the 27th of June through the 4th of July. We've seen really consistent modeling here with above average temperatures, with the highest above average temperatures showing up west. Why? We're getting a bit of a breakdown in the wavelength pattern of the Aleutian low. What I mean by that is instead of there being an Aleutian low and a west coast low, the pattern seems to elongate a little bit and put a little bit more ridging into the west coast. But this is really interesting. The latest runs here going out to Saturday, July the 4th have now brought in a wet corridor here and in through there, only keeping parts of the southeast dry and just patchy dryness in the northern plains, which honestly, it's quite challenging to predict the northern plains midsummer anyway, okay? But this right in through here is what I was really interested to see why the models are showing that. And this is what we've got. Now, this is a map showing mean sea level pressure and anomalies. And what I'm seeing here, I want you to look at the height lines, okay, or the pressure lines. There's where our high pressure cell is sitting. It's still out here in the, way out here in the central Atlantic. But it is suggesting that what's happening now with this moisture transport coming out of this direction may be changing to come a bit more out of the Gulf of Mexico, returning moisture and giving us that almost ring of fire-like precipitation in through this area. Now that would be absolutely critical given that once we get to this particular point in July, some of our corn will of course be pollinating and it will be critical to get those rains plus slightly cooler weather. So we've got to watch this very carefully. Is there multi-model agreement? Well, I went out and grabbed for the same time period the CFS, and what it's shown is, look, you can see the drier conditions in there, and then you also notice almost a wet ring around it. Now, is this set in stone? I don't think so. It's just what the current model runs have looked at, and as we see the next few iterations of these long-range models, I'll report back to you to see if they change. One thing is really interesting, though, is look at the CFS keeping Montana and the Dakotas wet. This would be critical as we've seen drought lately in this area, although we did have some really nasty severe storms there last weekend. So I'm going to have to watch all of this. What I don't like is what's going on down here in Arizona. Right now, the models are not necessarily picking up on any sort of a clue that tells me that the monsoon's going to come in with some sort of normality in terms of precipitation. I'm going to watch that carefully and keep reporting back to you. Bigger picture things. This is a current look at current global sea surface temperature anomalies. We are continuing to see a very warm North Pacific, and we've been analyzing that. There's been a bit of change coming off the Baja, but overall not too strong of a trend. What's been going on in our El Nino La Nina region? Well, we've seen, let's just look at this. There's a zero line. Remember that if you get below negative 0.5, we start to talk about La Nina. We've seen in Nina region 3.4, the values dip, they then rebounded, and they're going back down again. And that's because there is plenty of cool water still surfacing here over in the eastern side of the central equatorial Pacific. So this La Nina event is continuing to develop here, and it's actually going to be pushing farther toward the South America coast with time, while the warm water really piles up here on what should be some stronger trade winds. We can see those stronger trade winds right here showing up in the forecast in the blue. So that's just sending stronger winds across the Pacific. What's interesting is the Southern Oscillation Index has yet to kind of respond to this. So remember that when you get up here above 7, we're talking about La Nina conditions. So I'll just label that La Nina. And when you get down here to below -7, this is both off the charts here, we're talking about El Nino conditions. So the Southern Oscillation Index crashed, and it's just bumbling around here. Yet the stronger westerly winds should indicate that it's going to be moving back, well, up into positive territory. But one of the big reasons why that's not happening is that the MJO is stalled out into a bit of a standing wave over Africa. So watch this. The MJO came out of phase 3 at the end of May, went screaming like this through phase 6, 7, 8, and as June started, it just kind of slowed down and stalled out over here in phase 1 and phase 2, and now the models are just keeping it right on the edge of phase 2 and 3. So that means all the storms are here, phase 1, 2, and 3, and you can see that from the day today on the 11th through the 25th, the models, well, notice how straight up and down the Hofmüller diagram is. Normally we see the MJO progressing eastward, which means it would normally do like that with the cooler colors representing rising motion, and like this with the warmer colors representing sinking motion, but it seems to be stuck in this almost standing wave is what we've been kind of referring to it as over Eastern Africa. Now that's a wild card in this longer range forecast. But when I compare that with what global winds are doing, remember we were watching since mid-May the global winds drop. And we have always been concerned, and I've told you this, that if they continue to drop, that blocks up the whole pattern and puts us potentially over into hot, dry in the midsection of the country. Well, lately, just in the last day or so, things have stalled, and some models are suggesting we're not going to continue this downward spiral. Remember, just because it's not happening now doesn't mean it can't happen in July or August or September. This is a near-term look over the next couple of weeks. But I was trying to understand where that drop-off in relative atmospheric angular momentum was. Now, this is a graph I've never shown you before. And by the way, I have got to thank Victor Cassini, who's the guy that gives me all these maps. They're phenomenal, and I want to show you something. Well, this is the equator. So the northern hemisphere is in that direction, the southern hemisphere is in that direction. The greatest drop-off in global atmospheric angular momentum right now is happening in the southern hemisphere. This is affecting Australia. We're going to be looking at that in another long-range video soon about what's happening there. But overall, the winds in the north have been moving. So in other words, the North Pacific isn't really getting blocked up. So before I show you the long-range forecast, a new long-range forecast, let me give you some conclusions. One, remember we're moving into the heart of summer. So normal jet stream pattern for summer is weak and north. That means the dominant precipitation type or precipitation regime is going to move over to thunderstorms. This is going to get away from low pressure systems, okay? So we're moving over toward weak pressure differences in storms. Two, now, today, Wednesday, the 11th, or 10th, whatever the heck day it is, I don't have a reason at this point to get overly concerned about blocking. Now, you got to understand, I'm concerned about blocking every day of my life. I'm a meteorologist. That's what we watch for. But nothing right now is advertising blocking in either the North Pacific or North Atlantic. But I'm going to tell all of you, you watch with me the pattern for Greenland and Alaska for some early cues if a highly amplified pattern emerges and slows this whole thing down. Wave number will crash, and we'll start to see much slower winds over the North Pacific. Now, where I could be wrong, and this is always important, if the global atmospheric angular momentum plummets, like it did in 2019, that could send, well, like it did in 2019, Iowa and Illinois into drought. If that MJO doesn't move, if I'm still telling you that it's standing there in phase 1, 2, and 3 next week and the week after, then I'm going to start to say this longer range pattern has more risk toward getting stuck. 3 is probably the most important bullet point. If the drought expands in the southern plains, we can often get what we call a positive feedback loop. And that could limit moisture in the western corn belt. And if we continue to see that Bermuda high slide east, well, ring of fire sets up. The biggest unknowns always at this time of year is tropical cyclone activity. And if you've been looking at that map down there at the bottom, well, let me blow it up for you and show you what you're looking at here. That is the July through September precipitation anomaly forecast from the 7 models that are in the NMME, National Multi-Model Ensemble. And wow, is this model feeding on an active tropical season, okay? Not only there, but look at Central America. What has it done? Well, it still has wetter conditions in through this corridor. See it? Drier in the northwest. But it's backed off on how wet the wetter region is. It's still trying to keep the southeast wet. Now, all we're doing is we're just looking at the models trying to understand what they're saying. Because what we do is we then compare it. You see, this was last month's long-range outlook, and remember, these are always released at the beginning of the month. This is last month's outlook for July, August, September from the European. And it was also saying wet in through here in those homebrew systems that could be along the East Coast. Well, look at how things have changed. This is the newest run over here on the left. I'll just label it new over here on the left. It still keeps this on, but it's got in just a slightly drier bias over here. I mean, it's moved into the first stage off of average, but still it's a trend we need to pay attention to. I think this is a result of when the model was initialized, the MJO was stalling out. The global winds were slowing down, and the model's going to respond to that. That's what it's doing. Temperatures, last month over here on the right, newest over here on the left, okay? Look at where the warmth was last month, and look at how it's now moved into the central part of the United States for the latest forecast for July, August, September. That is another trend we need to keep a very close eye on. I think all of this is getting wrapped up into the fact that with the cooler water emerging here, the latest forecast for July, August, and September is a much broader La Nina feature. What is not happening, and we've analyzed this in several videos, is we're not seeing the models advertise any cooling in the North Pacific. And these two things are going to fight against one another. Okay? So that is our setup as we move forward. I hope you found this informative and instructive. But please, if you have questions, put them in the comments. I'd love to read those. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon, okay? Thank you.